Alright, so in this video we're going to learn to create this roller bearing. This is a really nice little fidget toy, very satisfying to spin around on your fingers, and it teaches you some really simple but useful techniques in Creo, like revolving patterns, things like that. We're going to use an axis pattern to create all these rollers inside of the roller bearing. And it's a nice little fidget toy because it's pretty compact. It's just a slight bit above 2 inches in diameter. So I'm going to walk you through it here, and hopefully at the end you'll have a nice fidget toy that you can play around with. And this is going to be for one of my exploratory classes. So what we'll do first is start our fidget toy from the same view that my students will start with, or you would start with if you just open the program. So I'm going to close out of this, and up in the top left here I could either hit File, New, or I could just click New right here. So I'm going to click New, and we're going to make sure we're on Part and Solid, and we're going to call this T2-Bearing, and then we're going to go ahead and hit OK. That'll bring us into our part, and then if they're not already on, what I would like you to do is go up to your datum display up here and just go ahead and turn on all your datums. That should bring your different datum planes up. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to revolve what's called the races, the inner and outer race of a bearing, or a round bearing that rolls, whether it's a roller bearing or a ball bearing. They have two independent surfaces, or two independent mechanical parts that can spin at different speeds to allow things to spin. And if you don't know what a bearing does, it actually handles a lot of that wear and tear that would normally happen if two parts were spinning against each other, or rotating against each other. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to make sure we're on the Model tab, and then we're going to go over here and we're going to click on Revolve. Now once we go into Revolve, it'll bring us into our standard Revolve menu here. And what we're going to do first is we're going to create a sketch. Now I like to create my axes and things like that, that things are going to rotate around and revolve around inside of my sketches, so that I can define them with dimensions and things like that for drawings down the road or more complex designs. So that's how we're going to do it. We're not going to create anything else other than our sketch right away. So we'll go ahead and hit Define up here, which will bring up our sketch menu. And then what I'd like you to do is either hover over your front plane. You can see it highlights on the left in my model tree. This is our model tree over here. Or you can click on Front. And when you click on Front, it'll auto-populate with the right and the right. That works for us. We'll go ahead and hit Sketch. And I have my settings to automatically rotate, but if yours don't and you're still in that three-dimensional view, you can just hit that Sketch to View or Sketch View option right here, and that'll rotate your part for you. Now the next thing we're going to do whenever we create a revolve is we're going to create our axis right away that we're going to revolve around. So we're going to pick Centerline, and it doesn't matter which one you pick. You can pick this one, or you can pick a sketch Centerline. They act the same way. I'm going to pick a Centerline. I'm going to hover over the middle here. I'm going to click, and you'll see that it'll attach itself to the center of my coordinate system, and then I'm going to move over till it snaps into that vertical position like you see right here. So once I click that, I'm in good shape there. And then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to create what's called our race by just drawing it roughly how it's going to look, and then we'll set up some parameters to make sure that it works the way we want it to. So whenever you want to exit out of a feature, for example my Centerline, I can click the middle mouse button like this, or I can just go up and hit my arrow. So if I was still in there, I can just hit my arrow and it'll bring me right out of there. And then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go up and pick Line up here, and we're going to draw sort of the shape of my roller outer race. All right, and what we're actually going to do first is we're going to draw just half of it and then mirror it down, and then we'll actually mirror that whole thing over as well. So what I'd like you to do is somewhere out here, a little ways away from your center line, draw a line, make it go from there, click, go up, make sure it's nice and vertical, don't put it at an angle, click, go over to the right, click, down, click. We're going to set dimensions, so don't worry if they don't look exactly the way I have drawn it here. We're going to go down at an angle like this, click, and then straight down and click on the middle. You can see I'm still attached, So again, you can either hit the arrow up here, or I like to middle click. Almost works as your escape key there. You can see I'm still in the line command, so I'm actually going to middle click one more time, and that'll bring me out and go, whoa, here's a whole bunch of different dimensions you might want. We're not going to stress about those quite yet, because we're going to create the rest of the race first to make sure it's nice and symmetric. So what I'd like you to do first is click somewhere out in space so that it's no longer highlighted here like it was, and then out here in space, click and drag a big box around all your edges here and entities. And then once you do that, you're going to go up to the top and click on mirror to mirror the selected entities, and then come down to this horizontal line and click it. And that's going to automatically project those down where they're nice and symmetric. You can see these little symmetric constraints that it's created on these points. Now you could have drawn this thing roughly about this size, but you would have had to put all of those constraints in by clicking symmetric. This just takes a step out of there for you. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is I'm going to show you how to put a diameter dimension in. Even though we have some here, I'm going to show you how to add these just in case you don't know or need a refresher. So we're going to go up to dimension in the top right here. We're going to go out to our outside line right here, outside edge. We're going to click it. We're then going to go and click the center line, click. And then we're going to go back and left click the outside edge again, click. Now we're going to move up above, up here, and we're going to middle click. And it's going to put in a dimension for the full diameter as though this part went all the way around to the other side over here. Of course, we're going to do that when we actually revolve it. Now, the reason that that creates a diameter, just so you know, is that we're simulating going from the outside of a round part to the center, back to the outside, which, you know, results in a diameter. So our diameter here is going to be 2.188. Type that in, hit enter, and everything's going to scale down. Okay. The next dimension we're going to need is we're going to pick this outside edge again, and then we're just going to move to the left and middle click to get a vertical dimension. Our vertical dimension here is going to be 0.375. We're going to see if that makes our sketch kind of weird. I thought it might, so if it does, that's okay. Let's just go ahead and hit either undo up here, or you can hit Control Z. All right, and we'll put some other dimensions in first that are going to control the shape of this, so that when this shrinks down the way that we just saw, it doesn't sort of collapse on itself like that, where all of a sudden it's a little bit tougher to see what we were intending to do. Okay, so we'll just leave that dimension there. That's all good. And then we'll bring our dimension feature back up by clicking that. And we'll zoom in over here by just wheeling in on the mouse and click on this little edge right here to control that so this can't move too far down. So we'll click that, move over to the right, middle click again, and the size of that is going to be 0.063, which will shrink that down. All right. Now we do have a few other dimensions we need to put in before we try and move this around. Okay, so another dimension we're going to need is we're going to pick this angled line, then we're going to pick this horizontal line, and then we're going to middle click right in between the two, okay, which is going to give us an angle dimension. We'll give that angle 45 degrees and hit enter. Then our next dimension we're going to go ahead and put in is the width of the top of this. So we're going to click on this edge. We're going to move up to the top and middle click, and we're going to say that the width of that is 0.125. And this thing starts getting wonky again. So we'll go ahead and undo that, and we'll control another dimension here before we change that one. All right. Now, once you use Creo more and you're more experienced with it, I've used it for years. I can kind of tell what it's going to do, which is sort of why I'm doing it in this order, to show how we get around it. But if you have a good handle on how your sketch is created and how your constraints are controlling it, it's a little bit easier to sort of identify how the sketch is going to react when you change a dimension. But you can see what's happening with this one is as it shrinks in, it gets too small. It wants to keep that 45-degree angle and that height, but the inside line is the one that's not controlled right now. Okay, so what we'll do to control that is we'll take our dimension tool again. We'll go from here to here, and then we'll middle click to the side, and we're going to say, well, that's going to be only 0.063. All right, and then we'll say that this right up here is now 0.125, like we did earlier. Okay, and then the last thing we're going to do is we're going to go over and double click this number now, which should give us a better result. We're going to make that 0.375, about 3/8 of an inch. And we can see now this looks a lot more like our shape when we've shrunk it right down. All right, now the next trick we're going to do is, if I was, and don't do this right now, you can just kind of watch what I'm doing, but if I was to end this feature right now, you can see I'd have the outside race of my bearing. But we are actually going to create both races in this same feature. Okay, so I'm going to go back into my sketch, so I'm back where you're at. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a sort of symmetric shape so that we can put the rollers inside and know that they're going to work. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to pick Centerline again. This time we're going to hover over that horizontal line instead of the center over here, and we're going to click a little to the right of where our first sketch was. We're going to click, and then we're going to make that line go vertical like this. Okay, and depending on the scale you're at, you can see mine's sort of changing a bit, but that's all good. My center line's there either way. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take, by clicking over here in the same area again, we're going to highlight all that stuff, draw a big window around it, and we're going to say mirror again, and we're going to mirror across that line I just created. And that creates the other side of our race. And now it's saying, okay, well, where do you want the inside of this to sort of control the space in between? We're actually going to control the space in between right here. All right, like in a normal bearing, you would control the inside diameter and the outside diameter, because that's what interacts with your two parts. But in this scenario, we're making a fidget toy, so I'm more concerned about considering what the shape or the size of my rollers are, so that my fingers can sit on there and spin them around and be sort of, you know, having a satisfying feeling to it. So we're going to go up and pick dimension again, and we're going to go from this line here to this line here, and then we're going to middle click above, and we're going to tell it those are 0.32 apart. All right, that's a number I came up with earlier, sort of testing it out. All right, and now we're done with this sketch. So we can go up to the top right, hit the checkbox. We can see those races spin around, all right, which is great. And then we can either hit the checkbox or we can middle click. And you can also see, by the way, that it by default is assuming my internal center line, the one that we created first, is the one we want to rotate around. All right, that's why I like to create them inside the sketch, whereas a lot of other tutorials may show you to create them after or create an axis. I think it's just an unnecessary extra step in my experience. So we're going to hit the checkbox, or I like to middle click. Now we have two races here. All right, now before we get too much detail here, we're going to put those rollers in and pattern them, and then we'll go through and add some rounds to make it a little more comfortable in our hand. All right, so now that we have this, what we're going to do is we're going to create another revolve right up here. And I'm going to create it on that same plane as last time. So you could click on the front plane over here. And again, if yours doesn't rotate, just hit that sketch view option right here. Now, here's where it gets a little tricky. We're going to use existing references to sort of define our roller, so that if we move these races at all, the roller is automatically going to update with it. All right, now, kind of creative way to do that is if we hit this little cube here, all right, where we have our shading options. All right, make sure you don't click this one because this one's your views. If you do, it's all good. It's right to the left. So we're going to click this, and we're going to make it a wireframe. All right, and what that's going to do is allow us to see inside. All right, now it's a good practice when you have something else driving the shape of something to actually create references to really define that thing that you're creating in Creo. It's good practice in any 3D modeling program. So what I'm going to recommend you do is go up here to references in the top left, and then what we're going to do is we're going to go right down in here, and we're going to pick some of the edges that are going to dictate things. So we're going to need that top edge. We're going to need this edge here. We're going to need this edge here. This one, this one, this one, and this one. All right. And it's up to you. Like we can do like a mirror situation, but we're just going to put them all in for now, just to sort of make it work. And then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to put in a center line just like before. Again, you can click either one of these, doesn't matter. And we're going to click right in here, right on this horizontal line, make that center line go right up, because this is going to be the center of our roller. And I'm going to give you the dimension of where the center is. All right. But you could also figure it out with some other things using construction lines and things like that. All right. So we're going to need that. And then we're also going to need a center line over here to control the diameter to that distance. All right. But we'll mess with that in a moment. All right. So now let's create the shape of our roller, and then we'll go ahead and put some dimensions in. So we'll go line right here. We're going to go from here over, click, come down. You notice I'm leaving space between these. All right, down like this, click, over like this. Now, one key thing here that's very important is as you come down at the angle, you can see like right now nothing's happening, but as I get closer to parallel with that shape, you can see it lights up in green. So we want that. All right, so we're going to go down like this, down here, okay? And that's where I'm actually going to stop, because I can use that mirror command to kind of handle everything else. So I'm going to click that to finish that right on that edge there. And then I'm going to middle click, stay within my line command. If you hit the arrow, it's all good. Just click line again. And then I'm going to create a line that goes from here all the way down like that. All right, click. I could have done this afterwards, but you know, it's all good. We're going to do it in this order. So I'm going to middle click again or hit my arrow. I'm going to click over here so nothing's highlighted first. I'm going to draw a little box so I get those top 1, 2, 3, 4 lines. And then I'm going to let go. And you can see they're highlighting green. It doesn't matter if it highlights references and whatever. I'm going to hit mirror. And then I'm going to pick this horizontal line to mirror all that down. You can see it turns like a shade of like magenta inside here. It can be different depending on what your settings are in Creo, but I'm on like the default color settings, so the magenta here indicates, oh, this is a closed area. This will be a solid if you create this right now. All right, now we got a few dimensions we have to add in. All right, so the first one, pick dimension, go over here, and we're going to control our clearances. So we're going to go from here to here, and then we're going to middle click up above, and we're going to make our clearance 15 thousandths, 0.015. Now what I'm doing here is I'm creating some space to allow this part to be able to move independently of this and independently of this. Obviously these already have space between them from when we created them. And the reason for that is that I want to sort of control, the tighter this is, the harder it's going to be to spin. The looser it is, the more loose it's going to be to spin. But there's a fine line between there where this might like fall out, for example, if I make the clearances too big. All right. The other thing you'll find with 3D printing is that your clearances may need to be different in different areas. All right. Now for this part, what I found is the clearances can be the same everywhere, but I'm just going to show you the way that you would typically want to dimension something like this. All right. So the next one would be from this angle to this angled line. We're going to middle click over here. We're going to make that 15 thousandths again. And then the last one we're going to need is from here to here. And we're going to middle click and make that 15 thousandths. All right. Now, if I found that it was binding up in a certain area, for example, or I want to keep this tight but make it really loose up here, like that could be something that might solve sort of the way that my part works. All right. Now you'll notice one great thing about Creo is it's going to infer dimensions that it thinks you still need. All right, so it says, oh, hold on a second, you still need to figure out this because this is going to control how wide this is. And what we're going to do to control that is we're actually going to go from this inside line to this center line we created earlier, back to that inside line. And we're going to come up above and we're going to middle click and we're going to say the diameter to the center of these rollers is 1.618. And that's going to move that center line over. All right. Now, if you've created all this correctly, you should be able to, and I'll kind of turn off, I'll switch back to my shading so you can see. But if we switch back to shading and then click our middle mouse button and rotate the part, and I hit the checkbox, we can see it's going to spin that little roller right inside there. All right, which is exactly what we want. And now we can go ahead and hit the checkbox. All right, and we have our roller and we have our races. Okay, Now I'm going to show you a couple really handy things that you can do when you're designing parts within Creo, or if you're designing parts that have a lot of repeated features, ways you can save a lot of space. All right, so first off, we're going to use the round tool or the fillet tool, depending on what program you're using. And we're going to first make the races really comfortable. And the reason we're going to do those separate from this roller, even though the roller will have the same fillets on there, is that once we pattern the rollers, if we keep their fillets independent, we'll be able to also pattern the fillets with there. All right, I'll show you what I mean in a moment. So what you're going to do is you're going to hold the control button on your keyboard, and you're going to click this edge, this edge, this edge, and this edge. All right, now the reason I'm clicking control is you'll notice it says set 1. The reason we care about that is if I have multiple sets, then I have multiple dimensions to control things and they won't all move at once. All right, now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click my middle mouse button and hold it down and rotate my part over, so I can then hold control and pick the same series of edges on the bottom of the part. Okay, and go ahead and rotate it back, make sure I got all my edges. Now the number we're going to put is not going to be huge, it's going to be 0.01, all right, which is going to be a fairly small radius. We just want to get rid of those sharp edges so it's nice and comfortable in the user's hand. All right, now we're going to hit the checkbox or middle click. Now we have nice rounded edges on there to make it comfortable. We're going to pick round again. We're actually going to use the same size, but we're going to pick just this top edge, which is another one that the user's finger may interact with. We're going to click down the middle mouse button, hold it down, rotate it over. We're going to hold control. We're going to pick that other edge, and then we're going to hit the checkbox. And I'll show you why we made these separate in one moment. Okay, now if you want to go back to that default view, hit this little view cube, and hit standard orientation. That'll bring us back to our normal view. All right, now I'm going to turn off my datums just to show you what we're working with here, or why we're doing what we're doing. So I'm going to turn this off. Hit down. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to right click Revolve Tool over here. And we're going to hit this pattern icon right here. Okay, and what we're going to do is we're going to switch from a dimension pattern to what's called an axis pattern. We're going to go up to our datums and turn on the axes, which is going to be one right in the middle. We're going to pick that, and it's going to auto-populate 4 of them at an angle of 90 degrees. Now what I recommend you do is hit this angular extent instead, which then auto-divides the amount you say among a certain angle. We're going to use 360 degrees all the way around. Then we're going to change that 4 to be a 12. Which will then fill all this in. And we're going to hit the checkbox. Now we have 12 rollers in our bearing, but you'll notice that not all of them, other than this one, original one we made, has rounds. Okay, let's turn our axes off so we can see everything again. Now here's why we kept those separate. Remember this separate round we made for this. If we now right click that and hit pattern, it's going to default to what's called a reference pattern, which is then going to say, all right, here's your original, but you have 12 of these. You have 11 additional ones. Do you want me to use that same pattern of rounds all the way around instead of you having to go through and click, 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 click 22 more times? So I'm going to hit my checkbox. And now I automatically have all those rounds around there. Reference patterns save you a ton of time. If you think about putting in like washers and bolts and nuts and things like that, if you make a hole pattern, you can reference pattern all those things that relate to that pattern all at once in a couple clicks, rather than having to manually assemble over and over and over and over again. Okay, so the last thing we're going to do just for fun is we're going to give it some color. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll go up to view, we'll hit the down arrow here on appearances, and you can create your own if you want. If you want to right click, hit new and all that good stuff. But we'll just pick a color. I'm going to pick, I don't know, we'll pick green. All right, you pick whatever color you like. I pick green. I'll see a little paintbrush show up. Easiest way to apply it to everything is just pick your part itself right up here. It'll highlight and then middle click. And your part will turn green. Okay, so that's how we create this bearing And we can view it in a different way if you like. We can look at it shaded with reflections and all this cool stuff. But this is a great little fidget toy. On the bamboo printers I've been printing it on, I think it takes all of about, I don't know, maybe 15 minutes to print it at a pretty accurate speed. And it's a pretty satisfying little toy that my students like to play with when they're trying to concentrate on something and get their work done. All right, thanks for watching.